Welcome to another episode of the Gay Barchives Show, where we explore gay history one bar at a time. I'm your host, Art Smith, and today we'll be joined by author and New York Times journalist Erik Piepenburg, who will take us on a journey exploring the gay restaurants that played such a vital role in our community. So, welcome, Erik.
Thank you for having me. Really glad to be here.
I am thrilled that we're going to get to do this segment with you. As you know, I have read Dining Out cover to cover, and I'm familiar with a number of the places in there. And for those who are not familiar, so Erik has been a New York Times journalist for a couple of decades. He lives in New York City, and he recently published his book, Dining Out. And unlike the focus of a lot of the different gay history books that are out there that take a look at all the different bars and nightclubs and discos, Erik took a different twist and he decided to focus on the places we go to eat. And you'll come to learn as you listen to this interview and then of course read the book that the premise is that they played a very important role in the development of our community as well. In some areas, probably more important because there may not have been the gay bars and other facilities for people to hang out, but there was a gay-friendly restaurant where they could go on a date and have a chat. So, what actually kind of got you kickstarted into this theme? How did this come about?
Sure. Well, in 2021, I wrote a story for the New York Times that I thought would be about the death of gay restaurants because I came out and came of age in the 90s and I lived in several gay neighborhoods. I lived in DuPont Circle in Washington, D.C., in Boys Town in Chicago. And I went to school in New York and spent time in Chelsea. And, let me tell you, on a Friday night, if you walked down Halsted Street in the middle of Boys Town in Chicago, you had your choice of at least a dozen or so restaurants and cafes where you could go to be with, in my case, mostly other gay men. And the whole dining room was just nothing but gay men. And that had been sort of dwindling in the years since. And I remember writing the story thinking, well, the gay restaurants, that's not a thing anymore. We've just become, as a community, we've become some more integrated and mainstream that we really don't need that. And that is somewhat the case in New York City. But I was so glad to be wrong that the gay restaurants are in many ways still thriving in other parts of the country. They may not be there in the numbers that they used to be, but they are thriving in ways that in small towns and in medium-sized cities, they are thriving in ways that they did, at least in spirit, back in the 90s when I remember gay restaurants being so important to my own sort of story of coming out and discovering who I was as a gay man.
And I can totally appreciate that perspective. I came out in the late 70s, and shortly after that, I was living in Nashville, Tennessee. And I remember very fondly an establishment there that was pretty much a restaurant slash bar. It was called the World's End. And I remember thinking, wow, it's really nice to be able to come here and be gay, to go with a date and not worry if the next table is, um, at looking at you or aiming a firearm in your direction. You just felt comfortable and at home. And the same thing several years later when I moved to Atlanta and discovered several restaurants there that were very openly gay, almost exclusively gay. There were a couple. I know you mentioned one in your book is the Gallas. Another one was the Prince George. There was also the Sweet Pepper, which was a Mexican restaurant in Ansley Square. So to me, it kind of gave me a warm, fuzzy feeling because I can relate to the fact that, yes, the bars were important, but sometimes you just connect on a different level in a restaurant than you do in a bar. And there's been a lot of people out there. Lately I've interviewed quite a number of people who have somehow or other been involved in documenting gay history. I've interviewed Rick Carlin a couple times, Mark Zinnemann, Gregor Mattson, a number of different people. And oddly, when I was reading your book, they're all mentioned. Every one of them makes an appearance in that book. And I thought, well, this is a great feeling because there's a community out there of people who not only want to preserve our history, but who want to share it with other people who want to preserve our history.
Yeah, and this conversation that we're having right now is art is very much in line with what happened when I talked to people for this article. I would say to them, "Tell me about your favorite gay restaurants," and they would sort of be taken aback because no one had ever asked them about gay restaurants before. We know a lot about gay bars, and people can tell you all kinds of stories about what happened at the bars and the clubs and everything, but most of the people who I interviewed were sort of shocked that someone wanted to know about gay restaurants, which I think shows the extent to which they've sort of been undervalued and underappreciated in our community as places, as you said, where you can experience gay friendship and romance and sex and entertainment in ways that you really can't at a gay bar. And so I wanted to sort of look back and take a lot of those memories that I made with people that I talked to and expand that out and learn more about restaurants that I'd never heard of before that were still open, or restaurants that were long, long gone, but that meant something. And the other interesting thing too is I would often ask people, "Tell me about your gay restaurant memories," and then they would say, "Well, I'm not sure what you mean by that." And I said, "Well, let me ask you this. Where did everybody go after the club closed? Where did everybody go at 3 a.m. when, it was last call and you were still didn't want to go home? Where did everybody go?" And they said, "Oh, well, everyone went to this restaurant and we were a little tipsy and we were flirty and we had pancakes and we had steak and eggs or whatever." And then the next question that I would ask is, "What kind of restaurant was that?" And it was a diner. To a person, it was a diner. And so that conversation sort of made me realize, oh, I need to have a chapter about diners. And so that just goes to say, people aren't used to talking about gay restaurants. And I hope this book sort of changes that and starts a new discussion about the importance that they played in gay culture.
And continue to play.
Correct.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, I lived in Atlanta for quite a while in the 80s, 90s. And Atlanta is kind of a unique place because it's in the heart of the Deep South, but it is very liberal and open-minded within the city of Atlanta. And even going back to the early 80s, I remember numerous diners and even a Shoney's that was extremely popular with the gay crowd after the clubs closed, because at that time they were open, 24 hours practically. Some of them were open 24 hours a day, and they would get a huge crowd. Some of them even had drag queen waitresses or whatever, even if they were not gay owned or they were part of a franchise operation. Because of that particular market and that location, they serviced, the community very well for a long period of time. And as you mentioned, a lot of them were diners. Atlanta has one called the Majestic Diner, which is on Ponce de Leon. It's been around since the 20s. And you can never walk in there and not see gay people. There's a Waffle House that's on Cheshire Bridge Road, right in the middle of where all the gay bars used to be. There's still a couple around there. And it's the same way. So it's definitely part of our community. And fortunately today, and we'll get into this a little bit later with specifics, but Wilton Manors is kind of an anomaly also. A lot of people don't know what Wilton Manors is all about, but it's a 2 square mile island city with a 1 mile main strip. On that 1 mile main strip, there are probably 30 gay, LGBTQ, whatever you want to call it, restaurants and bars within a 1 mile walking distance. And there are so many restaurants on there. There's 8 or 10 restaurants that are actually gay owned and operated and almost exclusively gay clientele. So it is an alive and well concept. It's not something from the past. Now, you mentioned to me earlier, um, and you open the book with Annie's Paramount in New York City. I mean, in
In
Washington,
Washington.
D.C.
Yeah,
In
yeah, yeah.
Washington, D.C. And Annie's Paramount, formerly known as just the Paramount, um, is an incredible place, and it's still in operation, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Annie's is what I call a legacy gay restaurant, in that it opened in 1948 and started to become gay in the late 50s, early 60s, with local DC gays just knew that it was a place where you could hang out. Of course, you didn't see any pride flags. Nobody had Grinder back then, so you just word of mouth sort of became the way that people knew that you could enjoy a meal with friends at Annie's and you could feel safe. And fast forward, here we are in 2025, and Annie's is still going strong. They celebrated their 75th anniversary not long ago, and it really is a what I argue in the book is sort of the gay restaurant that has been serving the DuPont Circle community for decades now. And what's interesting, you also mentioned this too, Art. It's straight owned. It's not as if these are a bunch of queens who run this restaurant. This is a straight family that because of Annie Katinas herself was her name. She was sort of the mama bear protector of her gay boys at Annie's. She's really the person who turned that restaurant gay, and she passed away a couple of years ago. But now her family, again, straight people, her family has sort of kept Annie's spirit alive. And I'm telling you, you walk by Annie's and there are rainbow flags everywhere, inside, outside. You look inside and it's mostly gay men. It's just about the gayest restaurant you can think about, which is why it's the first chapter in my book.
And I noticed that a number of these restaurants that you mentioned, uh, I guess, appeal to a very wide cross section of people. They're very democratic. It's not like you're choosing the snootiest restaurant in town that you have to make a reservation 6 months in advance and it costs $300 a person to have dinner. These are very community oriented restaurants. They're the kind of places where you can walk in for anything from an appetizer and a soft drink to a full blown, meal that you spend with 25 friends and stay there for 3 hours. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. You used a great word, democratic. They're very democratic places in general. Yeah, there's only really a handful of restaurants in my book that I would say are sort of uh, fancy, fine dining, high price point places. In general, these are fairly modest restaurants in terms of price point, in terms of menu. And sometimes it's just a bar that serves a really good burger. And most of the restaurants are not going for, Michelin star type of cuisine. That's not to say that there isn't some great food at these restaurants, because there certainly is some fantastic food. But yeah, that's one of the important distinctions about gay restaurants from gay bars. What sort of sets the two apart is that they tend to be a little more democratic. You're not going to get usually you're not going to get a lot of attitude, and the restaurants that I write about generally are open to all kinds of people. You can be a 14-year-old high school student, and you can go there with your gay straight alliance to one of the local gay restaurants. And you can get in because you're too young to get into a gay bar, but you can go to a gay diner. On the flip side, you can be a gay elder who doesn't want to go to the bars because they're too loud and they don't feel welcome there anymore, and maybe they can't afford a $20 Cosmo, and they just want to go to a restaurant, or maybe people know their name and they know their order. And so you can be anything from 16 to 65, and in general, you can be welcomed at these restaurants in a way that you might not feel like you are at a gay bar.
yeah, that is absolutely true. And I've noticed too that there's kind of a trend in the industry that way to begin with. As you know, my project initially focused on preserving the memories of the bars that we've lost. And within a short period of time, it became obvious that current establishments should be included as well. Because otherwise somebody 20 years from now is going to be trying to dig up the history of something that I could have written down from memory.
Yeah.
And it expanded again to include other safe spaces like restaurants, because there is a trend in the industry that way anyway. There's a couple of places, I'm not sure how familiar you are with some of them, but for instance, in New York City, in Hell's Kitchen, there's a place there called Red Eye that was opened by Daniel Nardicchio. He's famous for starting the underwear party on Fire Island. He's always been kind of an adult oriented entertainment guru in the club scene. But when he opened Red Eye, he made it so that that serves also younger clientele, is open during the day. They have coffee, drinks, and mocktails and some light bites. And he's doing the same thing in Fire Island now with the Ice Palace. And in DC, there's a place called As You Are Bar, and they opened a couple years ago, a woman-owned establishment, but welcoming everybody, LGBTQ and every other letter of the alphabet. And they have the same kind of philosophy. They're including food. They're including non-alcoholic beverages and entertainment and experiences for younger people. So these restaurants kind of set a trend that is now even being incorporated into the bar scene and blurring that line even more. It's questionable whether or not, for instance, in Arlington, Virginia, is Freddy's a bar or a restaurant?
Yeah, and that sort of blending of types of spaces and those blending of sexualities and gender is very much what I in the book I call sort of the queer vanguard of restaurants, because I think a lot of people today who, especially younger generation, millennials, Gen Z, are sort of more open to the idea of, well, everyone's welcome. It's just open the door and queer and everyone is just welcome here, which, is different than how things were in the 70s and 80s when you had mentioned a lot of these restaurants were just exclusively gay men or were exclusively lesbians, and the two just weren't interested in being part of the other's restaurant. And I think that's definitely sort of gone away a bit more in terms of a more inclusively queer environment. I know some queens who wish we'd go back to those days when it was just gay men at the bars and at the restaurants and everything. But I think things have changed now, and I think the community is much more interested in being with other people who aren't necessarily queer in the same way or gay, however you identify it, and is different than you are.
Yes, absolutely. And back in those days, I remember when I moved to Atlanta in 1983, I went out to a club probably 7 or 8 nights a week. I mean, it was normal. It didn't matter if it was a work day or not. That was the only place you could go other than some of these restaurants to socialize. So, you went out just to see friends and talk to people and maybe learn how to line dance or whatever it was that bar was doing that night. And that's not the case anymore. Part of the problem I'm seeing is that the frequency that people go out, especially those of us who partied in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we're not going out 7 or 8 nights a week now. We're not spending 7 hours a night in a bar drinking. We're going out maybe on an occasional weekend or when we have out of town guests, and it's a different thing. Bars cannot survive with that type of clientele. It requires a broader audience. And of course, another thing that we could discuss briefly is that the costs have gone up. Back
Yeah.
in those days, the gay bars were in the meatpacking district or the industrial district or, a warehouse zone. And the clientele didn't care because we had a gay place to go. But now, every place that we've built up neighborhoods have become gentrified. And now everybody wants to live there. And that bar, that might have cost somebody $30,000 to buy the space 25 years ago is now $1.5 million for the same space. Requires a different clientele. In the book, you mentioned quite a few restaurants that were important to you and that you had personal experiences with in different cities around the country. And I just want to touch on a couple of them. We talked about Annie's, which is basically just a casual steakhouse. It's not trying to be Ruth's Chris or anything fancy. It's just a local neighborhood steakhouse in DC that is very accepting of the entire spectrum of the rainbow community. Another one that you talk about fondly in the book um, is Melrose Diner in Chicago. And that, of course, is a diner. Tell us about Melrose Diner.
Yeah, sure. The Melrose Diner was at the corner of Melrose and Broadway for anyone who knows Boys Town in Chicago. And I lived in Chicago basically the last half of the 90s. And the Melrose was about 5 minutes from my house. And I must have eaten at the Melrose at least 3 or 4 times a week. And I almost always got the exact same thing. And every time I talk about it, I sort of have that sense memory, that food memory. It was a broccoli and cheddar omelet, a big Midwestern style omelet, not this thin crepe crap that you get here in New York. It was a big sized broccoli and cheddar omelet and a heaping mound of buttery home fries. And I'd always get the Melrose's signature sweet and sour cabbage soup. I ate that same meal at the Melrose, like I said, 3, 4 times a week for about 5 years. And sometimes that was with friends in the morning when the whole place was on a Sunday and everyone was, getting up from the night before. But a lot of times that was just sometimes me by myself. My first journalism job was working the 4 to midnight shift at the NBC station in downtown Chicago. And after I got off at midnight, I'd take the bus, it dropped me off right at the Melrose, and I'd walk right in and sometimes just sit there by myself with this meal and read a book. These are the days before Grindr and before everything was on your phone. You just sort of had to either read a book or read one of the gay newspapers that were sitting there, or one of the gay guides. You had to sort of entertain yourself other ways. And when the Melrose closed in 2017, after about 56 years of being open, it was like a death in my family. I don't mean to sort of talk about in those terms, but it really was those memories of what it was like to be there, and to be there in my 20s. Because let's face it, when you're 20s and you're in the gay neighborhood and going out to party every night of the week, like you said, is very different now that I'm 54. And looking back, I really think of how much the Melrose meant to me, whether or not I was there with a bunch of my friends or with my parents or on a date or just by myself. The Melrose was such a special place, and now that it's gone, I kind of want the memory of that particular restaurant not to fade away. One other thing I'd mention about the Melrose too, you might walk by it outside and you wouldn't necessarily know it was a gay restaurant. It's not like there were pride flags all over the place or drag queen servers or anything like that. But once you walked in the door, certainly on a Sunday brunch, it was mostly gay men, at least in the years that I was there. And that's how you knew it was a gay restaurant. I think someone would walk by and not even think twice about it. But you walk in that door and all you see is a sea of queens. That is a gay restaurant. And I'm sad to see the Melrose gone, but I hope this book sort of keeps the memory of that place alive.
I'm sure it will keep the memory of a lot of places alive. And beyond that, probably generate new memories when people start thinking about the Melrose. They think about, well, where else did we go in Chicago?
Yeah.
Where else do we go in New York? Where else did we go in Atlanta when we went out to eat? And even just during the course of this conversation, I've had half a dozen other restaurants pop into my head that I haven't much thought about in decades. So, I think it's gonna really kind of hit a lot of people, very warmly. They're going to be very, very receptive to reliving some of these memories.
Well, Art, can I ask you to share one of those in the time that we've been talking? What is a memory of a gay restaurant for you that came back that you have warm feelings for? Do you mind if I ask you that question?
Turning the tables.
I am a
Well,
journalist after all.
you are. Um, in the formative years of my gayhood, I lived mostly in Atlanta. For about 20 years, I was in Atlanta. So a lot of my first exposures to, these kind of scenes were in places in Atlanta. And of course, one place that stands out in Atlanta is the Gallas. which you do mention in the book. And the Gallas was a very unusual restaurant. A lot of people thought the building used to be a funeral home. It was actually a private residence, but it just had a very kind of spooky look to it, very ominous looking building. The upstairs was a restaurant, and they had white linen tablecloths and nice service. It was well appointed. They had low key entertainment, maybe a pianist or something like that. They were very well known for their signature dish, which was called Chicken Elizabeth, and it was kind of a stuffed chicken breast, and people used to go there exclusively just for that purpose. Oh yeah, let's have Chicken Elizabeth. They had a huge brunch crowd, and you would see a lot of people that were a little bit more on the business side of the gay community, a little bit maybe more dressed up, wearing a nice polo shirt or a button down, and you thought this is a really nice place. And you'd step out of this grand white building with the big rooster painted on the side, and you'd go down to the sidewalk level and walk down a few more steps and go into the basement bar. And they had a separate basement bar there. And the basement bar was one of the darkest, seediest, cruisiest bars there were in Atlanta. You would have practically naked guys swinging on the overhead water pipes and stuff, doing all kinds of things. It was very common for, quote, rent boys to work there. Even if they weren't employed by the establishment, they would go there and hook up with the patrons. It had been connected with some nefarious activity. There were a couple of people who were involved in luring hustlers into their cars and performing criminal acts upon them and leaving them for dead somewhere. There was a lot of strangeness going on, but the restaurant upstairs was like the absolute opposite. And either place you felt totally comfortable. You could go upstairs in a three-piece suit and have a nice dinner with some friends, and then go downstairs into the basement bar and finish out the rest of your night with cheap cocktails and cheap dancers. So it's those kind of places that feel special. But as I said earlier, Atlanta had a multitude of gay-friendly restaurants back then. The Prince George was right next door to Backstreet and the Armory, and was also another nice restaurant to go to. There was a whole chain of restaurants in Atlanta called the Peasants, that were operating for decades and had restaurants all over town and even in the suburbs that were all very gay friendly and very nice restaurants. And probably one that is very memorable to a lot of people is the Colonnade. The Colonnade was on Cheshire Bridge, which used to be the main strip for a lot of the bars in Atlanta, gay bars. And surprisingly, it's always been known for gays and grays. So it was either, senior citizens or homosexuals. And it's been there since the 20s. It's still in operation. And it almost closed last year and was purchased by a gay couple. So it is now actually gay owned. After 100 years of operation as a gay friendly establishment, finally the owners are gay. So
yeah, I had the good fortune to go to Atlanta during research for this book, and while Gallas isn't there anymore, that's the restaurant that if you ask me what I would take a time machine to go back in time to go eat at, it would be Gallas, that's for sure. But the Colonnade is still there, and the night that my partner and I went, it was definitely, I wouldn't say all gay, but there were definitely tables of gay men, and I thought the food was delicious. I had a peanut butter and coconut pie, flavors I'd never heard of before, and it was I could just imagine, sitting there thinking of the history of that place that had been around for so long and that had been a draw for for gay men for so long. That was really one of the more special restaurants that I ate at, certainly in Atlanta. The other one was Mary Mac's, which people said I should visit in Atlanta too. That wasn't that gay though. The day that I was there, I would say we might have been the only gay couple in that dining room. But at the Colonnade, that was definitely way gayer. So it was just nice to be able to see some of that gay history still going on there.
Absolutely. And Mary Mac's, I don't know if I've ever been there when it's been predominantly gay, but it's very gay accepting. So it's even if there are no other gay people in the restaurant, you're not really worried about what other people are thinking. You're comfortable there. Um, the most recent claim to fame for Mary Mac's, if I've got my facts correctly, is a number of years back, the infamous local drag queen, Mr. Charlie Brown, and his longtime partner, Fred Wise, went there for a 70th birthday party, I think it was, for Charlie's 70th birthday party, and got engaged and possibly married there at that very event. So, I mean, they're very accepting of the community, as are many places in Atlanta. But the Colonnade definitely draws on the heartstrings. And I agree. I wish Gallas was still around. I had the fortune of interviewing Ted Binkley, who was involved with the Gallas and a frequent visitor there as well, but also had operated two well-known Atlanta bars. One was Illusions, which was a drag show bar, and the other one was Crazy Ray's, which was a restaurant bar that is no longer existent, but is in the space where Mix is now. So it's the legacy of the space is still there. It's just not Crazy Ray's anymore.
Well, and one thing I should say too, that if you want to experience some of this era of Atlanta, there are some great videos of Gallus on YouTube. There's a Atlanta Video Digest, I think it was called, was this cable access show that that did a segment on Gallus, and you could see the white tablecloths and the flowers, and the manager had on a crisp white shirt, and everything looked very presentable. They didn't get into the hustlers too much, but they definitely made the Gallus seem like the kind of place where you could take a date for a nice dinner. And I suppose those in the know knew what you could do in the basement. There's also a wonderful video on YouTube of the Silver Grill, which was a diner also in Atlanta with Miss Peggy Hubbard, one of the servers there, who I just think is, if you ask me, is a national treasure. So I would highly recommend going to watch videos of the Silver Grill, which I wish I could go back to the Silver Grill, let me tell you.
Did you ever get a chance to go there or no?
No.
So the Silver Grill was quite a place also. It was pretty much a diner. It was on Monroe on the edge of Piedmont Park, more in the center of what is now the gay hub, at least for the bars. But the Silver Grill, it was a greasy spoon. I mean, you went there to get, French fries and grilled cheese and whatever, fried chicken. But Peggy was what made that place so special. And if you can imagine, Peggy was kind of like, if you could ever find an episode of Leave It to Beaver where they went into a restaurant, the waitress that would have worked there with her hair jacked to Jesus and, sprayed with 3 cans of Aquanet, that was Peggy. And in the old days, she used to come to take your order. She'd have a cigarette in her mouth. She was but she loved her boy. She was another one of those characters. And the Silver Grill made a huge impression on a lot of people in the gay community because, as you mentioned, not only could people who are not old enough to drink, but also people who are in recovery, who don't drink at all, people who are, don't want to go out and dance or hear loud music, but they're going to eat every day. It was another kind of warm hug. You went in there and you just felt better. And it's sad that it's gone, but it did play an important role in the history of Atlanta. And I will never forget the Silver Grill. In fact, I believe my friend Jody Hanvey, who has a channel on YouTube called Jody's Midtown Madness. He did videos. I don't know where the hell he got the video recorder, but he did videos back in the 80s and 90s and 2000s in Atlanta. And he has them all on his YouTube channel. He shares them regularly in my Gay Barchives group. Um, and there are segments there with Peggy and segments that show the inside of that restaurant as well. So there's, as we move along, we're kind of picking up the pieces, and you certainly have been a big part of that.
Yeah, and if you do watch that video, not only do you see Peggy, but you see the inside of that dining room. And when I tell you that was a gay diner, in this video at least, it is all gay men. And we're talking maybe 1984. So everyone had the mustache, the muscle shirts, maybe a preppy kind of polo t-shirt. It's just a wonderful snapshot of that time, and we're talking the early 80s, so it was a very difficult time. But at the same time, you just watch this video and there's so much joy and life, and Peggy with the hair and her eyeliner. I mean, it's just, she is such a treasure. I think if I write another book about this topic, it might be about Peggy Hubbard and other waitresses who had a like mama bear, tough as nails kind of demeanor. I would count Annie Katinas of Annie's in that. There was a wonderful restaurant that I didn't get to write about in my book, where there was a waitress that the gays called Dirty Helen. And it's just that you know exactly the type that I'm talking about. You didn't take any crap from her, and at the same time, she would love her gay boys like they were her own sons. So maybe that's another idea for my next book.
I'm sure there's going to be a lot of ideas. And the more people you meet and encounter as you're talking about this book and doing these book signings and things, I think your head's going to probably explode.
I think so.
Now we're getting ready to do an event. Right now, we're entering Pride Month 2025, and your book officially comes out on June 3rd, correct?
Correct.
So the book will be out by the time this video is released, and we're planning on doing an event at Stonewall Pride in Wilton Manors on June 14th, which is also Flag Day. And
True.
Unfortunately, well, it'll give the whole world something to watch other than Trump's military parade, because I think that's scheduled for the same day. But Stonewall Pride is a big event in Wilton Manors, and Wilton Manors plays a role in your book as well, because as I mentioned earlier, on a 1 mile strip, there's easily half a dozen or more just restaurants and another 20 plus bars and restaurants. So there's a wide variety there. And you mentioned a few of them in your book. One of them, where we're going to be holding this event, is called Tropics. Tropics has been around for decades. They also used to have a location, by the way, in Tampa. I don't think it lasted really long, maybe 5 years or so, I don't recall, but there was a location in Tampa. But the one on Wilton Drive is at the very foot of Wilton Drive, literally steps from the end of the Rainbow Bridge. So it's like the first gay thing you encounter when you get into Wilton Manors coming over the Rainbow Bridge. It's changed size over the years. Originally, it was a smaller space. They've now expanded to take the entire building. It's also housed a number of other gay restaurants or bars next door to it, including a lesbian sports bar at one time. So the building has a varied history, but it is still operating. And they are, going out of their way to kind of reinvent themselves and make themselves even more important to the gay community in Wilton Manors. But traditionally, Tropics was known as a bar for old men. It was called a wrinkle room. And people, obviously Florida is a popular place for gay men to retire, and Fort Lauderdale is no exception. So the community there, finding people that are over 60 years of age in the gay community in Wilton Manors is not a problem. And that bar became very, very popular. And they still have somewhat of that reputation. They still get a lot of the senior crowd in there. But it is a full service restaurant. It has a bar. It has an entertainment area where they can do live performances. They have a piano in the bar, separate rooms for private parties. It's quite an interesting place. Have you been there?
I have. I was very excited that I got the chance to visit Wilton Manors to do research for this book, and that was actually the very first restaurant that my partner and our friend went to when we visited. We kind of just wanted to start at the end of the strip and just make our way down during the during the couple days that we were in Wilton Manors, and yeah, I really enjoyed Tropics. I mean, it had that sort of old not old what am I trying to say, it felt like Annie's, it felt like Company, these restaurants that I write about in my book, these were just really fantastic places for mostly gay men to get really terrific food, maybe hear some show tunes, maybe mingle with people, their friends, or to meet some new people. And as after we finished our dinner, we spent time at the bar, and the crowd was definitely a little on the older side. I would say my generation, Gen X, and the Stonewall generation, men who are older than me, with a sprinkling of younger gay men here and there. But in general, it was a really good introduction to what I found in Wilton Manors, was that in a lot of ways the gay men who have gone there to retire, it's almost as if the 70s and 80s never ended in some ways. I mean, I was just amazed at all of the restaurants and bars that we went to, Courtyard Cafe and Pub on the Drive and George's Alibi. Is that right? All these places that I went to, that it was just seeing these men older than I am, which you don't really see a lot of men that age in New York City and Hell's Kitchen, where I live, partying at the clubs anymore, but you sure do in Wilton Manors. And how lovely was that to be among that generation, whether I was at a bar or restaurant or coffee shop. It was as if the 70s and 80s had never ended, and we're still going to keep the party and the fun going. And there was no other place that I visited in my book that's quite like Wilton Manors. Maybe the closest was San Diego. The Hillcrest neighborhood is just blocks and blocks of very gay friendly restaurants, but generally a little bit younger. Wilton Manors, as you said, is an older community, and God bless them. I had an absolute blast when I was in Wilton Manors. I was made to feel very welcome everywhere I went, and I knew all the songs that they were playing on the loudspeakers. I don't know the music today, but you give me Crystal Waters and Christine W. and Taylor Dane, and I'm happy. And that's all that I heard when I was in Wilton Manor.
Well, you've mentioned a couple of other places in Wilton Manors, and one of them is the Pub on the Drive. Um, it's owned by a friend of mine, Alex Sadeghi, and it's a great little establishment. Um, Wide variety of food, daily food specials. You can get dinner there for $7 on a weeknight. Um, Great crowd. They do performances, and they added recently what I consider to be a South Florida staple, a huge outdoor patio. I mean, how can you live in this tropical paradise and not have a couple thousand square feet outside where people can enjoy themselves, 11 and a half months of the year? So that's, a nice touch there. You mentioned um, Courtyard Cafe. That was a great place. It's no longer in business. They changed ownership about a year and a half ago, I think. Became a place called Myth Gastro Bar, and kind of upscaled the environment a little bit and tweaked the whole situation. And they just announced this past week that Myth is closing, and they're going
Oh,
to bring something else into there. So we don't know what the next incarnation is, but there's something else coming. Um, you mentioned Georgie's Alibi, and the interesting thing about Wilton Manors, and you may have seen this in other areas that you've researched as well. So Wilton Manors does not have a really long gay history. Wilton Manor's first gay establishment opened 1980-81 at the current location of where the pub on the drive is. It was much smaller. It was a single storefront, and it was a lesbian bar called JJ's Den. The next big place to open in Wilton Manors was called Chardies. And Chardies was a proper gentleman's dinner club, white linen tablecloths, and it was huge, 10,000 square feet.
Oh, wow.
It included the current space that is occupied by the Eagle and Chardies. I mean, not and Chardies, and um, the courtyard. They were all connected. So they had this huge space there. And they had so many incredible performances there, you cannot imagine. They had full orchestras come in, like that would take up the entire stage at the presidential inauguration, and they would be performing inside the bar because there was so much room. Um, Eartha Kitt performed there, you know, I Need a Man, all kinds of great, great entertainment. So, and then the next big place to open up in Wilton Manors, because that was in the late 80s into the 90s, was in 97 when Georgie's Alibi opened up. And that space is still a gay bar. It is now called Alibi Monkey Bar. But those two places really set Wilton Manors on fire, and that's how it exploded the way it is. And ironically, they were both predominantly restaurant bars, not bars, but restaurants with bar service. So it's interesting that, in line with what you talk about with your book and how it impacts the neighborhoods and how it impacts the community, Wilton Manors is the perfect example of how a couple of large, mostly gay male oriented restaurant bars caused the entire neighborhood to explode. And going from 1997, when there were a couple of LGBT establishments in Wilton Manors, to now where there are 30 plus on that 1 mile drive, that speaks a lot to, the concept of how important restaurants are.
Yeah, that's true. And you also bring up a really good point that in Wilton Manors and really in many other cities in the country that I visited and researched, it's not unusual for for gay bars to serve food. That's not so much the case here in New York. I know that Julius, the legendary gay bar in the West Village, you can get a burger and a grilled cheese. They have a tiny little grill in Julius, and that's kind of one of the draws there. But the idea of a gay bar that serves food isn't so much really a New York City thing. However, you go to other parts of the country, certainly Wilton Manors, Ohio, where I'm from, and yeah, every gay bar you can get a burger or pizza to go with your meal. And so I wanted to explore in the book a little bit of that combination of the bar restaurant, which isn't necessarily a restaurant, but it serves that sort of same it's acting in the spirit of a gay bar. It's just that you can also get fries and a burger at the same time, which I think is really, really great. I wish there were more of those types of bars in New York City.
Right. And I'm sure a part of it is because of the cost of real estate. You need a lot more space to have a kitchen and a dining area than you do to have, 50 people stand up and drink $10, $12, $15 cocktails.
Correct. I actually talked to one of the gay bar owners who said that also, he didn't think that the gay men of New York want to be seen eating. Heaven forbid someone sees you eating a burger or slice of pizza, but that's not me. I would eat a slice of pizza at a gay bar tomorrow. So I think there's a certain kind of New York gay who just doesn't want to have, ketchup or, hamburger grease staining their shirt.
Well, I think too, it hasn't slowed down the Julius crowd, because
Right.
I think everybody I've ever mentioned the name Julius to has said, "Oh, they have great hamburgers."
That's right.
So
That's right. They
they
are
don't
they
they
are
don't stop.
known. for their burgers, that's for sure.
Yeah, they certainly are. And you'd be glad to know. Well, you didn't mention this one, but it kind of evolved out of the Hamburger Mary's chain. There's a restaurant, probably your last stop or one of your last stops at the end of Wilton Drive, called Rosie's, which
Oh,
is
sure, yeah.
another great example of a gay restaurant bar that has a wonderful atmosphere, great menu, and is always busy.
Yeah, that's true. And I've been a vegetarian since high school, and they had a really terrific Impossible Veggie Burger there. So they've now sort of, expanded their menu to include people of all kinds of dietary interests there. So I had a great time at Rosie's. I had the one of the stiffest cocktails I had all weekend in Wilton Manors at Rosie's.
Well, there's another new restaurant opening up. It will be open, I believe, by the time we are there for Pride. Um, it's it used to be called Tie Me Up. It
Oh, I
was
ate there.
it was a Thai restaurant. It had been there for a number of years and had been a Thai restaurant before under a different name, but they closed down last year. And another good friend of mine from Wilton Manors, who is the primary owner of the Eagle Wilton Manors, his name is Salvo Mule. He decided, hey, this space is available. I think I'm going to open up an Italian restaurant. So they have just had a beautiful mural done on the outside of the building by local artist Avi Ram, who is an incredible muralist, an Israeli, and he does great work. You'll see plenty of his work on the drive. And he did the mural on the outside of the building. Salvo is kind of upgrading the interior. It's going to have, nicer granite countertops and a modern twist. It's not going to be old school Italian. It's going to be a more modern, furnishings and decor. And it's going to have, I think, 1,000 square foot outdoor patio for dining as well. It's probably going to be a little bit on the upscale side. I don't think he wants to open up a pizza parlor, but it's going to be a nice addition to the drive, and I'm looking forward to trying it out in a few weeks. So
Yeah, fantastic. Me too. Yeah.
yeah, it's called Salvo's Osteria Romana. So we'll have to check that out while you're in town.
Absolutely.
So if people want to buy your book, where should they go to find it?
Yeah, it'll be out on June 3rd. You can pre-order it now. You can go to my website. That's probably the easiest way to access links. It's erikpiepenburg.com. But it'll be in bookstores starting June 3rd.
Excellent. And I will be sure to put the link up so people can see it. And we'll look forward to seeing how well received it is. I'm looking forward to seeing a copy that has photographs in it because my copy doesn't. But that was a necessary evil so I could get to read it and be prepared for what was coming. So I'll be looking forward to the book. I wish you all the best of luck with it. And I look forward to seeing you on June 14th at Tropics, June 15th at Tropics for brunch. And good luck.
Thank you, and thank you too, Art, for everything that you do for gay history, for gay culture, for keeping all these memories alive. I just have to say thank you. You were very much a part of some of the most important people that I talked to for this book, and so let me just take this chance to thank you for everything that you do.
Well, thank you. Just like you in your book have incorporated all these other people like Rick Carlin, Mark Zinneman, Gregor Mattson, myself, who are all involved in recording gay history. It's a collaborative effort. And we're all glad to help each other out and to help get the word out and to help make the history, preserved so that the future generations can see it. So I'm glad to see that it's such a welcoming community and that everybody is so willing to work together. And
it really is.
I'm sure you'll see Rick Carlin again too. I'm sure he will be with us for Pride in June. So I look forward to seeing you.
I can't wait.
Thanks.
Thanks.